2014-15 season, where Jim Harbaugh commits the unimaginable insult of going 8-8, a few years after making a Super Bowl appearance. The 49ers and Jim Harbaugh mutually part ways, to use the organizational speak. But essentially what ownership decided was that they chose Trent Baalke, the GM, over Jim Harbaugh. So Baalke is currently slumming it in Jacksonville, ruining Trevor Lawrence's career. But after that season, it was one of perhaps the worst, maybe if not the worst offseason in NFL history, where the 49ers lost, franchise legends like Frank Gore to free agency, Patrick Willis to early retirement, right tackle Anthony Davis retired temporarily and then came back. Justin Smith, who was an all-pro level, 3-4 DN, D tackle, jack of all trades. Michael Crabtree also departed. So it was just about as bad as you can get that summer, that off season. And on top of that, of course, instead of going out and hiring a real head coach with some real chops, they promote defensive line coach Jim Tomsula as to the head coach position, which was a disaster. It was a predicted disaster, and it ended in disaster. I think they went 5-11 that year. So the what if scenario here is, what if they decide to keep Jim Harbaugh instead of Trent Baalke, who made some great picks, obviously, but also kind of derailed this team and chose to take apart a team that was still a contender. So the question to you is, does Jim Harbaugh finally get over the hump and win a Super Bowl if he gets another chance with the Niners?
Yeah, there's a lot of important context that kind of framed what ended up happening, right? Kaepernick, we came to learn later, was playing with a shoulder injury, and he had surgery right after that 8-8 season. And then Baalke famously fires him, hires Chip Kelly, and fires Chip Kelly, and promotes that guy that looks like he divorced your divorced mom ends up dating Jim Tomsula. It seems like a nice man, but was way in over his head. I think Harbaugh needed another year or two. He seemed to know talent. He seems to be good at recognizing talent. Maybe you don't have this exodus of players leaving too. I remember a lot of players leaving, but looking at it on paper, good God, I mean, it's like almost a dozen people left the team.
I mean, I haven't done the math, but it sounds like double-digit Pro Bowl appearances between those guys, maybe 20. Probably just Willis and Frank Gore alone. It's probably 20. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Harbaugh figures it out. They somewhere along the way they figure it out. Maybe it takes a couple more years, like Shanahan ended up doing anyway. But Baalke has to be the one to go, not Jim Harbaugh. I think that's the what if is, what if Jed York doesn't listen to Trent Baalke? Because the thing with Trent Baalke is, you look at what happened in Jacksonville. I read Tim Kawakami a lot. Was not a fan of Trent Baalke and how he handled everything, and how Jed York favored Baalke. Is kind of like what we talked about in our Warriors episode, that Don Nelson would survive the apocalypse. Trent Baalke has survived the apocalypse, and Urban Meyer is gone, and Trent Baalke is still there. So I think that is the main thing that has to happen, is Jed York has to favor Harbaugh over Trent Baalke.
Yeah, and I was an avid 49ers hater, kind of still am, but that Jim Harbaugh era was painful for us haters, especially that 2013 season where they're coming off the Super Bowl loss, which we'll get to the Ravens. And I think, in NFL history, it's a pretty clear trend that the Super Bowl loser usually has a down season. It's even remarkable to make the playoffs after losing a Super Bowl, just because of that heartbreak and, everything associated with it. And instead of not making the playoffs, they go 12-4 and lose to Seattle on a miracle, interception by, I think it was Malcolm Smith, the famous Richard Sherman Crabtree play. So he definitely knew what he was doing. And it's kind of crazy to think that this guy who, didn't have a losing season over 4 years, went to, 3 conference championship games, went to the Super Bowl, lost his job, and has not been back in the NFL since. I mean, he hasn't had a great, time of it in Michigan. He had one great season this year, but it's wild to think that nobody really kind of threw the bag at him to try to get him back in the NFL. Maybe they will this offseason in 2022, but yeah. So that's the big what if for me.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and you did not have it on your list, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad you had it though.
All right, you had some of the other ones tie back into it.